nó ar lá idirnáisiúnta na man. Tá sé agrithe ag an cumandirí mar fort de ceadúra céad blian don chuman sin. So you're all really welcome to this very special event to mark International Women's Day, organised as part of the 100-year celebrations of the Law Society at NUI Galway. So delighted to have you here, delighted to have such a distinguished panel of speakers with us. I'm sure you'll join me in congratulating the Law Society on organising the event and also on their centenary and on a great week of events and facts that we've enjoyed over the past 7 days. So for this evening's event then, I'm absolutely delighted on behalf of the Society to welcome our wonderful and distinguished panel of speakers. The speakers individually have achieved at the very highest level within their own professions, and collectively they represent the major organisations involved in the administration of justice in the state. So we are honoured to have with us this evening the Minister for Justice, Helen McAtee, Senior Counsel and Chair of the Council of the Bar of Ireland, Ms Maura McAnally, who will be joining us shortly, Michelle O'Boyle, who is a partner in O'Boyle Solicitors and also President of the Council of the Law Society in 2020, and Deputy Commissioner of An Garda Síochána, Anne-Marie McMahon. So you're all very welcome to this evening's event. So just to give you an overview of the order of the evening, I'll briefly introduce each of the speakers, and then each of them will be afforded 10 minutes in which to talk about their career to date, and then we'll open it up to questions and discussion. So on questions then, if you've been joining us during the week, you'll be familiar with this, but you pop open the chat function there and you'll see the link for Slido. If you open that up and pop in the code, you can then open up the little box where you can type in your questions, and we'd encourage you to type in your questions as the evening progresses. I'll be keeping an eye on those, and then at the end of the speaker's time, we'll come back to the questions and then we'll pose them to the speakers. So without further ado then, we'll get going. Our very first speaker will be Anne-Marie McMahon. Anne-Marie McMahon, as we said, was appointed as Deputy Commissioner of An Garda Síochána in 2021, but she had been acting Deputy Commissioner before that, an Assistant Commissioner. But she's only the second woman in history to serve in that role, which speaks volumes in itself, and something maybe we'll get to discuss during the course of the evening. She has held a number of leadership roles within An Garda Síochána as Sergeant, Inspector, Superintendent and Director of Training and Development. She has served in Limerick, Dublin and with the United Nations in Cambodia. So Míle fáilte Ruth, Anne-Marie, and I'll now hand over to you for your 10 minutes. So Anne-Marie, I wonder if you heard that.
Yes, thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
I'm just waiting to be unmuted there.
Yeah.
So, okay, so it's a great pleasure for me this evening to be invited in the first instance, and then to have the opportunity to celebrate International Women's Day with you. And I just thought it might be helpful if I, did a bit of a run through my career and I suppose the trials and tribulations experienced along the way. So in 2019, An Garda Síochána celebrated 60 years of women in service. And looking back at the Dáil debates and the commentary, and particularly the advocacy work done by the Women's Council of Ireland in terms of progressing, I suppose, the need and the desire to have women on Garda Síochána, they were quite robust. And, I suppose looking back at it 60 years later, it's kind of quite shocking really, but they were the times that were in it, and I suppose we've come a long way since then. I joined in 1986, that's 34 years ago, 35 this year, and at that point women were still a bit of a novelty in terms of our presence in communities. We were mainly concentrated in the bigger cities and towns, and really just to kind of give an idea of how we were fixed, even from a uniform perspective, there were no pants for us. We had to wear skirts. So that was really impractical in terms of the job that we were trying to do. So it took a number of years before that to evolve. I suppose from my own perspective, I've been very fortunate in terms of the opportunities that I've had. And yes, maybe sometimes I was the token woman, but I grasped every opportunity with both hands, and then one thing led to another. So in the beginning, I didn't have any female role models. So I would have to say that my male supervisors and managers were very supportive. And, I always listened intently to what they had to say and looking out for words of encouragement, or, even looking to the future, in terms of what they thought might lay ahead for me. So, but it wasn't always easy, but I just kept going because I was doing a job that I really loved. And then, there's combining working full-time and family. And, I'm blessed to have two lovely children. They're both in their 20s. But combining those two roles, parenting and working full-time, is a challenge. There's the constant juggling and the endless guilt and leaving them early in the morning and trying to get home as early as possible in the evening time so that you'll see them before they go to bed and have a chat with them, and all these really practical things. And then as they get older, you're hoping you won't be missing from the sideline on a day that they'll play particularly well, or that you'll be late for school play, and all these things. And they never let you forget if you do. That's just the way life is. But I suppose these are challenges faced by all parents, to be honest. And when you put shift work into that equation, it just makes it particularly challenging. Being highly organised and having good childcare, is essential. I didn't have any extended family near where I was living, so my childminder was my saviour. None of us have it all, and careful choices have to be made in the context of, balancing family life and trying to keep some career options open when things get a little bit easier and when children get a little bit older. I firmly believe that equality for women cannot be achieved without women putting themselves forward for leadership roles in all walks of life. From a policing perspective, there are many different firsts along the way. The first females that were assigned to crime investigation, drugs investigation, traffic surveillance, and the list goes on. But all of these areas of policing were very much male dominated and male controlled. So each one of those ladies who stepped into those shoes for the first time, it was a big achievement and paved the way for the rest of us that came on the road subsequently. On the one hand, these ladies were thinking that they were probably there on merit. And then there was another part of them probably thinking, well, I'm the token woman. And, there's that constant conflict in terms of, figuring out why you got a particular position. When I joined in the mid-1980s, the organisation still didn't see women as, fully doing operational police work, doing the dangerous work that our male colleagues did. And they really kind of viewed us as more suited to office work and, light operational policing roles. However, change has come. It has come slowly, but today Garda Síochána is in a very different place from the place that the first 12 ladies joined in 1959. We are now above the European average in terms of our female membership. We're at 27%. And we're an integral part of every unit and section across the organisation. It is often said that women may have to work twice or three times as hard as men to achieve the same recognition. And whether you believe that or not, I do think that it's important that we back ourselves and that we back each other to ensure that we get the recognition we deserve. We're very fortunate in Garda Síochána that we're attracting high caliber female recruits from a variety of backgrounds. But we need to do more. We need to encourage more and want to encourage more women to join Garda Síochána. And I would like to take this opportunity to ask you to consider a career in Garda Síochána. There are so many roles, so much variety, and so many opportunities, both from a promotion perspective and a lateral movement perspective. And we also have civilian positions for particular expertise, whether that's law, IT, training, a whole host of things. So in general, I would say that the female perspective is really important, regardless of what your walk of life or your business area is. But I think from a policing perspective, it's particularly important. And we do bring a different perspective. And, it's been said on more than one occasion, the value that adds to a whole host of policing functions. So just to conclude, I would say to you that regardless of the path you decide to take, I would encourage each and every one of you on the call this evening to embrace the opportunities that present. There are many avenues to be explored, and just make the most of them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Anne-Marie. And, honestly, just listening to you, loads of questions are thrown up already, and I can see them flying in on the Slido as well. So I know we'll have a fantastic discussion later on. So I can see that Maura McAnally, if I'm correct, is with us now. So we might move on to her as our second speaker. Maura Mila Falcher Roth, and I think it's a welcome back from Maura as well, because she is a graduate of NUI Galway. So she's a senior counsel, and since last year is the chair of the Council of the Bar of Ireland. She is only the second woman ever to hold that position. So we have a number of trailblazers on our panel tonight, it's clear. She's from Leitrim, and as I said, is a graduate of ours. She was called to the bar in 1992 and then the inner bar in 2017. In 2020, she was jointly awarded the award of Woman Lawyer of the Year from the Irish Women Lawyers Association. It'll be interesting because Michelle, who's our third speaker, was the other joint awardee of that award. So Maura, you're very welcome, and I'll now hand over to you for your 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I'd like to apologise for being late. I blame it all on the court services and on the fact that Mr. Justice Bernard Barton was giving his very last decision. And of course, I'd have to be in the case that's on at 3 o'clock. As I look at the clock as it approaches 5 o'clock, getting more and more anxious. And then with my IT capacity, the link wouldn't work for me. Yes, but leaving all of that panic aside, this isn't all just blood pressure, the red face that's from across the road. And firstly, I'd like to say thank you so much for inviting me. And I'm seeing faces I haven't seen in a long while on this screen. Firstly, Emer Finnegan, who's also passed UCG. I won't say how many years it is since I've actually seen Emer. And then I see a face from last week, Matthew Mulrooney, who partook on behalf of NUIG in the intervarsity debates that were organised by the Bar of Ireland. And then before I start, while I have the opportunity, because I doubt I'll get the chance again, Minister, to just say congratulations and I wish you well in the coming months. And I hope that everything works out well. And on a final note, I'd just like to say that Maura is a lovely name. And bearing that in mind, I know that we've been asked to speak about ourselves and about our education and the pathways that we've taken to the point in which we find ourselves now in our respective careers. And I'm showing my age when I say UCG, and that is where I did my law degree and was very happy to do my law degree there and have very fond memories of UCG. And then I went to Warwick University where I did a master's in law. And then I came back to the King's Inns where it was then a 2-year degree course to become a barrister at law. So in 1992, I started as a junior counsel, and being born and bred in Drummond, County Leitrim, a place I always apparently mention every time I'm giving any kind of a speech. Having been from Leitrim, I did a lot of work on the Midland Circuit and part of the Northern Circuit. And you might ask, why did I choose a career at the bar? There was nobody belonging to me who had any connection or nexus with the law whatsoever. My father was a publican in a small village. My mother was a primary school teacher. And there were 4 of us, a very Irish family, Pádraig, Maura, Anne and John. I don't think one has to ask the provenance of those names. Are we Irish or what? I'm the only one who did law. Everybody else, engineering, music, accountancy. But education was seen as a great leveler, and UCG gave me a great bouncing board into life and into a great career at the bar. And starting at the bar, it is a slow commencement. It does take a while to build up a practice at the bar. But one of the things that attracted me to the bar, leaving aside the fact that it is still a very conservative career, where it is still predominantly men who make up the numbers at the bar, it was a career that attracted me because it gave you the capacity to ensure that people's rights were protected, not only my own rights, but the rights of my clients and the rights of third parties. And barristers have generally, through the years, been involved in campaigns that have resulted in changes in the law that I consider to be of benefit, not only to Irish people and our citizenry, but ultimately to humanity. And for example, when you consider that the Irish Constitution was a constitution that was followed by the Indian government, Ireland has produced a lot of great legal thinkers over the years. But it took Irish legal thinkers until 100 years ago, this year, 1921, to allow women to become barristers. So the first female barristers in Ireland were in November of 1921. So we are approaching the 100-year anniversary of that. And then I am the second chair of the Bar of Ireland. And the female, who was chair before me was Mella Carroll, 41 years ago. And the reason I mention Ms. Justice Mella Carroll, who's now deceased, is she was the first practicing female senior counsel in Ireland. And that was in 1977, which isn't all that long ago. So she was the first female senior counsel to practice, 1977. So even though women were allowed entry into the bar, whether it was by reason of economic circumstances or political circumstances or whatever, women did not become senior counsel until 1977. And she was the first and only, and was the first and only practicing for some 2, if not 3 years. Now we've come a long way, where the Bar of Ireland this year had an entry of 80 people, and 40 were men, 40 were women. It's the first time we have had equality in respect of that. But that equality, when you compare it with the entire numbers of membership at the bar, 41% of members at the bar are female, the remainder being men. And then of senior counsel, of which I am one, only 18% are females. So there has been a lot of work done, and there is a lot more to do. But a great means of achieving this gender equality and ensuring that the rights of all are respected, not just the rights of women, but the rights of men, the rights of people of different creed, the rights of people of different color, is by ensuring that we have equality across the board. The Bar of Ireland is changing. It has been and was quite a conservative place and would appear to have that reputation. But we are aiming for gender equality, and we are aiming for the recognition of greater rights of all minorities. So much so that we have effected our own diversity policy here at the bar, and we promote equality across the board. And one of the first programs to ensure that we have economic diversity and ensuring that everyone from every background has an opportunity of following the career path of being a barrister is the Denham Fellowship. Ms. Justice Denham was the Chief Justice who retired a few years ago. She was our first female Chief Justice, and we named the program after her. And that program is open to anyone who wishes to apply, who feels they are from a deprived economic background, or feel that they have a right to apply for monetary assistance from the Bar of Ireland in respect of not only their fees for education at the King's Inns, but also your fees here at the Bar of Ireland are paid for the first 4 years. And in addition to trying to open up the bar, we run a TY program. And this year, probably thanks to the fact that it was all done remotely, instead of having some 300 pupils come here to the forecourts and be shown around and be introduced to the King's Inns, be introduced to members, be introduced to judges, we had over 10,000 students tune in online in order to ask questions, in order to partake in debates, in order to find out what life might be at the bar if that is the path of career that they would choose ultimately. And further, in opening up the bar to gender equality, we have a specific mentoring program aimed at women, which is more senior women at the bar try and mentor more junior women at the bar. And in addition, we run a mentoring program in tandem with the Law Society, so that senior female practitioners of law, whether they be solicitors or barristers, assist junior practitioners coming into the profession and starting out. It is a long career path, and it can be a very challenging career path. And I have to say, I believe firmly in the words that Deputy Commissioner McMahon stated, which is that women have to work twice as hard, if not 3 times as hard as men, in order to make it at the bar. Not only are there the traditional hurdles, if I can call them that, where men were seen to be the breadwinner, where men were seen to be in the role of barrister or in the role of solicitor, where men were seen because of the paternal nature as the person you would go to. That has been reflected in careers in Ireland over the last 30, 40 years. And you must consider that the marriage ban is only lifted some 50 years ago. We're approaching the 50th anniversary in respect thereof. So we have come a long way and are going a long way, but there is a lot more to do. And other challenges at the bar, particularly for women, are those as Deputy Commissioner McMahon mentioned, which is, for example, childcare. And childcare is something that came to the fore during lockdown because, for example, barristers and solicitors are considered essential workers. So therefore, when court is on, as it was today physically for myself, or when it's done remotely, you have to be available to run your case. And we've all seen those faux pas or those funny videos where children run into the scene or cats and dogs run into the scene or surgeons appear from their operating theatre, scalpel in hand. We've all seen those funny videos, but they are realities. And it's suddenly a reality that I think society has recognised. And I must say that Minister McEntee, you are bringing the whole issue to the fore, reading the newspapers all weekend, where suddenly people realise that no, previous Taoiseach and previous ministers did not look for maternity leave. I don't ever remember Eamon de Valera looking for maternity leave, or indeed any previous leaders or Taoiseach in the state. But thankfully you have brought it to the fore. And it is about time in the year 2021 that there was a recognition that our female leaders in the Oireachtas, members of the cabinet, would require maternity leave. You just have to look to New Zealand, where you see the Prime Minister Ardern. She is a mother of young children. There was an absolute outpouring of dismay when a female politician attempted to take time out in order to breastfeed her child during a particular political debate. But these are issues that have to be brought to the fore, and that politician did it on purpose in order to bring to the attention of the male colleagues that child rearing is still left in this country to the remit of women, and yet women are trying to advance themselves in career, but society, when generally run by men making decisions, doesn't seem to reflect the fact that they are reliant upon 51% of the population to assist in decision making and should be enabled to assist in decision making. And they must introduce equality in respect of childcare, recognition of opportunities in respect of careers, and all of that. And Deputy Commissioner mentioned that there are some 27% of An Garda Síochána who are females. Again, that's a good number, but it's not good enough. No more than our own 18% of females being senior counsel. It's a good number, but not good enough. I'm not even going to comment on how many politicians are female versus the majority who are male. But again, it is not good enough. And women throughout the planet, and not just here in Europe and not just here in Ireland, have proven that when they are allowed to participate in the decision making that is essential in respect of our day-to-day living, proper and appropriate and balanced decisions are made. How can decisions be balanced if they are made by a minority who ignore the needs or requirements of the majority? So in the circumstances of even just looking at our population, it is essential that women partake in the decision making. And education is the great groundwork for ensuring that women have the right and opportunity to do that. And access to education and access to opportunities is a means of ensuring that gender equality is something that we will achieve, and hopefully that we will achieve in my lifetime. So I hope I haven't bored you all to tears, becoming impassioned on a subject that does mean a lot to me. And I would just like to thank you all for giving me the time and listening to me. So thank you very much.
Far from it. That was absolutely fantastic. And we very much appreciate the dash across from the courts to join us.
If only I was fit, but anyway.
Oh, you made it. There are so many issues that have been raised there, and all completely correct, and they will come up hopefully in the discussion. And you mentioned you wouldn't like to ask how many politicians, but no, it's not so healthy there either, about 22 or so % being TDs. But actually, while you're listening to the speakers, there is something I think that jumps out, and it's how recently we've had women being afforded the opportunity to join any of these. Deputy Commissioner McMahon had said 60 years for An Garda Síochána, which is quite shocking in many ways, and just over 100 years for both solicitors and barristers, in fact. And those professions have a lot of other internal barriers, if you like, for women as well, which have been touched on by Maura's very interesting talk there. I did want to call out one comment. It was a question, but it was a personal one for both Maura and Michelle, and I think you might enjoy it. It says, "Congratulations to Maura and Michelle from a former law classmate and Law Soc member way back then, listening from Kabul, Afghanistan, Mary Ellen from Donegal." So you're very welcome, Mary Ellen. It's fantastic to have people listening from all over the world. This is the wonderful benefit, if you like, about being online, even though we would in many ways love to be together as well. So we will now move on to our third speaker, Michelle O'Boyle. And Michelle is from that other branch of the profession. She is a partner with O'Boyle Solicitors in her native county Sligo. She's also a graduate of NUI Galway, so Fáilte Rótaráis, Chamaich, got Ulscoil na HÉireann Gaillimh, as we call it now. She was elected as the 149th president of the Law Society during 2020. And just to put that in context, she was only the fourth woman in its history to serve as president, and the first since 2003. And just in case you forgot the figure, there has been 149 of them and only 4 as women. So as mentioned earlier, she was also the joint awardee of the Irish Women Lawyers Association Woman Lawyer of the Year Award. So congratulations on that. So I'll now hand over to you, Michelle, for your 10 minutes or so.
Okay, first of all, thank you, Ursula, and thank you for that very warm introduction. And when I hear from our friend in Cabal, this is obviously the hottest ticket in town today for the women in leadership. Just, I suppose, by way of giving you a very quick snapshot into my own career, as you said, I went to NUIG. I suppose by way of background, I went to school in Sligo, the Ursline Convent in Sligo. I went to NUIG, where I studied a primary degree in law and French. Then I did my LLB, and then I progressed to doing the solicitor's exams, and I qualified as a solicitor in 1992. And what Maura hasn't told you is Maura and I were in fact classmates. We were actually in the same class at the same time at NUIG. So therefore, I suppose it was interesting that we both served as leaders of our respective bar council and law society, particularly as we were both in the same class at NUIG. So that's probably a testament to the excellent education we got at NUIG. But in any event, as I said, I qualified in 1992, and I qualified with my sister, Dervla. We qualified at the same time. And then, very fortunate for me, I had trained in the office of a gentleman called Ray Monaghan. At that time, he was the president of the Law Society. And I was very fortunate that I did a year post-qualification in his office, which opened up to me a world of opportunities in terms of the type of practice that I did. So a year or so after that, Dervla and I established our own practice here in Sligo, and we've been practicing together since the last in excess of 25 years. In our practice, it is a general practice, and because we're a 2-solicitor practice, we've been able to, I suppose, divide the areas of work. So my area is mostly in the civil litigation, and then Dervla works in the area of probate, conveyancing, the other side of things, if you like. But in terms of, I suppose, career progression and becoming involved in the Law Society, again, quite honestly, I hadn't really ever intended to become involved in the Law Society. I never aspired to be president of the Law Society. It just simply happened. I was very fortunate because in 1993, I think it was, I was the president of Sligo Solicitors Association. And at that time, we had at that time the third female president of the Law Society, Geraldine Clark, who was a native of County Sligo. And she came to Sligo for one of her council meetings. And in my capacity as president of Sligo Solicitors Association, I was hosting various events. And following from that, I was invited to put my name forward for election for the Law Society Council, which I did without any sort of a sense of I might get elected. And to my surprise, I got elected. So then I ran for election every year, every second year thereafter, and was successfully elected. And then, as you correctly said, last year, or rather November 2019, I had the honour and the privilege to be appointed as president of the Law Society for a 12-month term. And none of us could have anticipated the turn of events in all of our lives from March onwards. And whilst I had set out my journey as president of the Law Society, I had a particular map, if you like, with regard to what I was going to achieve from a year. And interestingly, one of those headings was women leadership. One of them was all around Brexit implementation and opportunities around all of that. But my plans, if you like, took a totally different diversion because we were all into the unexpected, but it allowed me to, I suppose, demonstrate strengths as a leader, and it allowed me really to, lead the profession in a way I mightn't otherwise have had the opportunity to do so. I'm proud to say that the solicitor's profession was the first profession worldwide to reach gender parity in 2014, and I've heard Deputy Commissioner McMahon referring to her numbers, and indeed to Maura McNally, but we were the first profession worldwide. In 2021, 53% of the profession are women. 35% are at partner level, which is just over 1/3. And I suppose, just to give you some numbers, conversely, in England and Wales, our nearest neighbours, 49% of practicing lawyers are women and 35% are at partnership level. So identifying, I suppose, why there is inequality at partnership level comes down to a number of factors, including many females choose to leave the profession because of family commitments, which includes caring for young children as well as elderly parents, because those roles have traditionally been undertaken by women. And aside from that, in my opinion, women have always had to struggle reaching their potential because historically, the input of women in decision making, as Maura has said, and on policy outcomes was never fully recognised. Now, I think we have moved somewhat closer to that recognition. The first woman admitted to the role of solicitors, Mary Dorothea Dowling, was in 1923. And interestingly, over the next 37 years, 100 solicitors were admitted to the profession. We've come a long way in recent years because in 2011, Claire Loftus became the first female DPP. In 2012, Eileen Creedon, now Miss Justice Eileen Creedon, became the first female Chief State Solicitor. The President of the High Court, Miss Justice Mary Irvine, is the first woman to ever hold that position, and indeed the only woman to ever hold 4 judicial offices. So I suppose in order to succeed, in my view, we need to have ambition and an unwavering resilience. And successful lawyers will tell you they've had to develop, and I can vouch for this, a thick skin and an unshakable sense of self-belief, and that can be difficult. Just in relation to, I suppose, initiatives which the solicitors profession have had. Firstly, in my opinion, and I'm biased, but we are a very progressive and a very agile law society. We respect and recognise people as individuals, and therefore we are driving awareness of the importance of gender equality within the profession and society. And in terms of our initiatives, in February 2019, the Law Society launched its Gender Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Task Force, of which I was a member. And the task force objectives were to facilitate and encourage more female solicitors and solicitors from diverse backgrounds to run for leadership positions within the profession and within the Law Society, and to provide meaningful resources to improve equality and diversity in the profession. And one of the recommendations of that task force was to launch a gender equality, diversity and inclusion charter, which we did under my leadership as president in May 2020. And the charter outlines our clear commitments to treat everyone fairly, to recognise individual needs of those we employ, to represent, to educate, to support development, and ensure we are mindful of the language we use, and that the way we work doesn't put anyone at a disadvantage. And in fact, 110 practices have signed up to that. And also, I suppose, another thing I'm interested in is the development around the male-centric language, which is frequently used and had been in society generally, where we all use the term dear sirs, in complete disregard and disrespect for the significant role of women in the society. And during the course of last year, I invited the solicitors profession to consider using a neutral or personalised form of address in correspondence, rather than dear sirs, to use words like dear colleague, dear Ms. O'Boyle, dear Ms. Connolly. And it was very well received. And I can tell you, and we're just doing an account on this last week, I would say 70% of the correspondence I now receive is addressed gender neutrally to either dear colleague, dear Miss O'Boyle, dear Madam, which is fantastic achievement. In terms of, I suppose, other initiatives that we have, and I think Maura has mentioned it, we have the Women in Leadership Programme. And since 2016, 118 mentorship pairs have been created. And in 2020 alone, 31 pairs have been created. We also have the Law Society Access Programme in operation for the last 20 years, where we have to date 200 access students. And this is to provide financial and practical assistance for students from socioeconomic disadvantaged backgrounds to enter the legal profession. In terms of a profession, I have to say, when I started out, I left school. I really didn't know what I wanted to do, like many young people. But I can tell you, over the last 25 years, I have loved my work. I simply, I wake up every day. I can tell you it's very difficult. We work exceptionally long hours. And particularly now with COVID-19 and the last 12 months, the nature of our work has changed somewhat. It has become we use a lot of remote technology, but it is a very kind of challenging job and very rewarding. So anybody, so I really feel that it's something which, if you have an interest in, and also to bear in mind that if you qualify as a lawyer, people don't just work in legal offices, they work in-house, they work in government departments, they work in industry, in education. It opens a whole range of opportunities, so really and truly, it's a very good starting point within which you can develop a really very worthwhile and very rewarding career. So Ursula, that's it from me. You're on mute.
There is a curious thing. I myself am blocked from unmuting myself. I don't know what the students are concerned about, but maybe they're right. But in any event, thank you so much for that. It's very interesting, and from both yourselves and Maura McAnally's talk, it's heartening to see the initiatives that are moving up. And when you talk about even that very simple thing of dear sirs, which seems simple, but is very exclusionary, it just in the language, and already makes you feel like, this isn't meant for you. And as a woman, there isn't a place for you here. And I know also within An Garda Síochána, we have heard of some of the initiatives there, and I understand there are more. There's a women's network as well being established. I had read about that. So all of that is really heartening, because we've heard the adage, and it's true, you must see it to be it. And it is absolutely the case, and it's great to see you being it, all of you here today. So with that, we will move on now to our final speaker. And we're really honoured to have Minister McAtee, who, as you know, is the Minister for Justice with us this evening. She is a Fine Gael politician who's been a TD for Meath East since 2013. She's a very experienced politician, having previously served as Minister for State for European Affairs from 2017 to 2020, and Minister for State for Mental Health and Older People from 2016 to 2017. She was raised in Meath and studied at DCU. So Minister McAtee, we're honoured to have you with us this evening, and I will now hand over to you.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Ursula, and thank you to Jessica and to Niamh and to all of the students and all of the team in the Law Society and to NUIG as well. Really delighted to join you today and delighted to join this wonderful panelists, albeit virtually, of women who really are fantastic role models. And just to say happy International Women's Day to everyone. I think it's something that has been around since the early 1900s, but I have to say as a young girl and a woman, it's not something that I ever remember us celebrating. So it's wonderful that in the last number of years, it really has gained prominence, and is such an opportunity for us to use platforms like this to I suppose to tell our own stories, but to celebrate the wonderful women who have gone before us, women who will never meet or never have that opportunity to, but who have paved the way and really have helped to make the society that we live in today, but also those who are a little bit closer to home as well. And you know, I suppose maybe starting out and talking about my own career without going back to when I was a baby in the cradle, but you know, I think what happens to you and the people who you know you're surrounded by when you're younger, it shapes the person that you become and I suppose some of the path that you take. And I was very lucky to have such wonderful women in my life growing up. My mother, who was a homemaker, but is an amazing woman, and my sister, my two grandmothers, one of whom's 95, the other who passed away last year, but at 94. Was such an important part of my life. My 21 female first cousins who have been such an important influence in my life and continue to play that role, but also my own father as well. And I suppose I was exposed to politics from an early age, but not necessarily in the conventional sense. So my dad, while he was a TD, he wasn't elected until I was 19, but at the same time, our family was involved in politics, you know, working within the party, working with local representatives, but also very involved in the community. And to me, and the longer I'm involved in politics, the more I see that politics, it's about people, it's about working with people, it's about supporting people, it's about introducing policies, new laws. It's about doing that to improve lives for people. And I could see my own father as I grew up, be it through his work in farming, whether it was football and the young men that he worked with, and I suppose the fact that he always tried to help people and to take everybody's concerns and problems on board. I think it really shaped the person that I have become, and really has, I think, stood to me in my own work in politics in a huge way. I studied politics as part of my degree in DCU, so economics, politics and law. And I think I probably, like a lot of young people in college, felt the pressure to have a plan and to know that when I left college, I was going to have a job and I should be doing this by a certain age and a certain time. And I think all of my friends, we had that idea. And what I'd say is that most of that went out the window for each and every one of us, because life is just unpredictable and you can't plan everything. But because of that need to have that plan, when I finished college, I had applied for a number of jobs, and one of them was in a bank, and I was accepted and I took on the role, but probably knowing it wasn't really the direction that I wanted to take. And that was no reflection on the job itself or the people in it, but it really wasn't where I wanted to be. So I finished my work for a year and I took time out and I worked in a bar. I went away for the summer. I suppose I did what maybe people say you shouldn't do, but I took that bit of a break to try and refocus. And I then came back and did a master's in journalism and media communications in Griffith. And it was at that time that I started working in politics, actually with my own dad. And he was running for a second time. And I really had a fantastic opportunity to get involved in campaigning and to see how it works on the ground, because even though I studied politics, it's very, very different studying something and how it operates in real life. And when he was re-elected, I had that opportunity to work with him as an opposition TD and seeing how that worked, and then as a government TD, and then when he was appointed as Minister of State in the Department of Agriculture, seeing exactly how the different legs of the Oireachtas and government worked and how they operated. And I think that gave me a huge amount of experience in that regard. I would have always discussed with my dad the idea of possibly running later on, and I suppose as a councillor, and knowing that his own seat and that position was something that would be there for some time. But you know, as I said, life is unpredictable and things happen, and my dad passed away very suddenly in 2012, and I was faced with a very unusual situation and a very challenging situation where I had to make a decision to whether I ran or not. And this was obviously something that I had thought about, but much further down the line. But, you know, I really think, even though it might, you might find yourself in a difficult situation, I think you really have to grasp things that come your way, and albeit in those challenging circumstances. So I ran for election, and thankfully I was successful. I had a wonderful team around me. And I always think, and I remember my uncle saying this to me, you're as good as the people you surround yourself with. And it's so important, no matter what you do, no matter what field you're working in, that you have a team that you work with and that supports you, and that you work with them as well. But I was the youngest female TD at the time when I was elected. I'm unfortunately not anymore. I'm getting to be one of the older ones, but I was the youngest female TD. I was 26 at the time. And because I was young and I was a new female politician, I suppose I was always asked the question, do you feel like you've been treated, or like you're treated differently because you're a woman? And I don't know whether it's because I was brought up in an environment where I had blinkers on, and I never thought that women couldn't do what they wanted to do or be who they wanted to be. And when I think back now, there probably were those little things that I probably just didn't notice, but I felt more that I was treated differently because I was young. I was 26. I was working with, I suppose, people, the average age was probably 55 plus. And I think a lot of people felt, well, she doesn't have the experience, she doesn't have the knowledge, she hasn't been a TD before, she hasn't been a councillor. And I felt that was something that worked against me. But, you know, I would stress, and anybody who's who's finishing up their studies, or who's going into a job, and it can be often daunting because you are the new person and you do have to gain that experience, but that shouldn't stop you from being someone that can contribute something, and you do have something to contribute, even if you are young. But I worked hard for the next 3 years. I suppose my biggest challenge for me was that I would be re-elected, and that, you know, there wouldn't be any suggestion that I was only elected because I was somebody's daughter or for whatever reason. So I really put myself out there, and after the next election, when I was successful, I remember saying to the Taoiseach at the time, who was Enda Kenny, there was a real need, and there was a real focus that was being placed on the issue of mental health, and it was in particular our younger people who were driving this issue. And I remember saying to him when the election had happened and he was forming his government, that he needed to place an emphasis on this issue, and he needed to make sure that it was a priority in his government. And I suppose by putting that issue forward, whether knowingly or unknowingly, I put myself forward as well, and was appointed as Minister for Mental Health. And obviously, you know, took on that role, and my particular focus was on younger people, but later on was then appointed Minister for European Affairs. And I have to say, it was only when I was appointed Minister for European Affairs, which was nearly 4 years ago now at this stage, that I found myself suddenly sitting in rooms where I was the only woman in the room. And it was happening not just at home, but across Europe as well, and in the various different meetings. And I suppose it brought back the stark reality that I suppose I had gone in with blinkers, and I was young and ambitious. But when I looked around me, there was still that gap, and all of our former speakers have spoken about the percentage. And you're right, Ursula, I think it's 22.5% female representation in the Dáil at the moment. So we're half of where we need to be. And I suppose it really came home when I was in that role. But I'm now in the Department of Justice, and I have to say, I think I'm very lucky to be there at a time when we have so many fantastic women working in that space. And I shared a platform with Anne-Marie earlier on as well, but we have the first female Secretary General in the Department of Justice, the head of the Court Service, Angela Denning, was the head of the Prison Service. We have Maura and Michelle as well. We have the Chief State Pathologist. We have so many women working in these wonderful places. But you know, this is only something that's starting to change now. And I suppose what I really look forward to is to the day where we don't celebrate or don't have to celebrate these firsts. We are and we will, and while it's happening, we must celebrate it. But I really look forward to the day where we don't have to celebrate those firsts. I suppose maybe just reflecting on where we are now, and in particular looking at International Women's Day and the theme for this year, and that is choose to challenge. And so I think we all need to reflect on whether it's our work or in our personal lives, and in particular if we're in positions where we have the ability to do so, we need to challenge ourselves over the next year, or whether it's in the next week or the next month. What can we do, each and every one of us, in our roles, in our personal lives, to try and improve and to make life better, and to pave the way for the women and girls who are coming after us, because that's what so many have done to ensure that we can take on the positions that we have taken as well. So, you know, we have a long way to go, but I'm really confident with the wonderful women that we have working in this justice space within the law sector, but across the board. That's something that we can achieve, but unfortunately we're not quite there yet. So until that day, International Women's Day is a really important platform to be able to highlight what it is we've achieved and where we need to go. And so I'm just delighted to be able to join you for that today, and to as I said, join this virtual platform with all of our other speakers. So thank you.
Oh, I'm muted. Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Minister McAtee. And again, I think there are themes certainly running through everything that each of you has spoken about. And while I've been glancing through the questions as they've been coming in, there are definitely themes emerging there too. Our time is unfortunately limited, so I'm going to group questions together as much as I can. But one theme, if you like, that has emerged is pathways into professions. And some of the questions were very specific. You know, if I want to join an Garda Síochána, for instance, what qualifications would I need? But pathways generally, and I think we could broaden that out. I mean, Minister McAtee, there was also a question about pathways into politics if your family is not necessarily political. I'm not saying that is always a massive advantage or maybe a disadvantage at times, but I think maybe for people who have not seen it around them, it may prove more daunting or feel more daunting. So just generally into all of the professions, it was the same for the bar. Some questions came up about just the financial instability of that job and how challenging it is in the beginning. And if you come from a particular background where you cannot support yourself, and I know, Maura McAnally, you've spoken about your background not being particularly, you know, privileged in any way, you know, but you still made it. But so just in terms of pathways into each of your professions, you know, how to get to where you have been, if you like. And if I might then add in, do you think that that pathway is different if you're a woman, or is there an extra quality you must bring to bear if you're a woman, or are there particular challenges you need to prepare yourself for if you're a woman? And you know, you can base that on your own experience, whether you faced those challenges or did not when you were entering your professions. So I hope that's not too broadly drawn for you. And because we have 4 great speakers, we might start where we finished. And maybe with Minister McAtee, if I could ask you to maybe address that at first.
Absolutely. I mean, I think in politics, women have always been involved in politics, and this is the thing. And, you know, while men have been to the fore and men have held the more senior positions and ran for election, women have always been there. They've always been determined, they've always been ambitious, they've always in many ways kept the wheels turning, but they haven't been given the opportunity. And it's only because of the women who have come before me and who have stood for election that we're starting to see that change. And to go back to what I said earlier, you can't be what you can't see. I think with politics, the more young women and girls see other women in politics, I suppose it highlights the fact that it is something that's possible. And I know many of my colleagues and female colleagues who I would have spoken to over the years, they got involved in politics because they would have been campaigning for, you know, whether it was a playground in their local community. One of my colleagues in Meath, it was a new school. It was, you know, women are getting involved through campaigns where they see that there are gaps within their community, And I suppose they're now being encouraged to actually put themselves forward, because they can actually put themselves in that position where before it wasn't the case. But I think also the way that you kind of encourage younger women, it is through education as well. And there hasn't really been, and when I was in school, there wasn't as much of a focus on politics and engagement with political life or activism, but that's something that's coming more to the fore. And one of the really fantastic parts of my job that I love, as I'm a minister, but I'm a constituency TD, is engaging with students, going into schools, talking to them about politics, what a life in politics is like, that it's a career that is available to them. And I suppose that it's about getting involved within your community, whether it's, with a political group. I would have been involved in Young Fine Gael when I was younger, but you don't necessarily have to be involved in a political group or from a political family. It's about identifying issues that are important to you within your community, and then putting yourself forward on those. So there are newer ways, I think, that people are getting involved in politics, whereas before it was a very closed door, and it wasn't necessarily open to everybody. But I do think that's changing. But it's very much, you can't be what you can't see, and it's only by seeing women in these roles that it encourages other people as well.
Do you mind my throwing another aspect into that, because it is one of the areas where it has arisen more than others, and that is the area of quotas. It was mentioned in one of the questions. Gender quotas have been used, in politics. I wouldn't say with massive success, but with some success. It certainly led to an increase. And how would you feel about that? Do you think there is a role to be played by gender quotas in order to make up for so many structural barriers that have existed for decades?
I think there is, and while it's not something that I think we should have, I think it's there to serve a purpose, and I hope that we can someday not require or need gender quotas. But I always reflect back on the fact that our first minister was in 1919, Countess Markievicz. The second was Moira Geoghegan Quinn in 1979, and then we slowly started to drip feed in. And if we're to wait that length of time to get to the 50%, would be another 100 years. So I think the introduction of gender quotas was necessary, and it's certainly in those few years that we've had them, it's seen quite a leap. But what would concern me actually is the election just gone last year. Even with the gender quotas, we didn't actually see an increase. We're still stuck at about 23%. So we have to ask ourselves, obviously it might, it takes time. I think gender quotas, introducing them at just a national level isn't enough. You need to introduce them at local level. Many people start off at local politics and work their way through. But, I think we need to look at other barriers, and some of our speakers have mentioned, family life, creating a better work-life balance, maternity leave, which is obviously very topical at the moment, and something I hope to take in the next few weeks. But, all of these issues are things that haven't been addressed, surprisingly, in this day and age in politics. And if we're going to encourage more women to get involved in politics, we need to accept that, this is part of life, having a family, being able to progress your career, go back to work, not be impeded in that way. So while quotas are positive, and I do think they will help, and I do think by introducing them at a local level as well, that would improve. But I think there are other barriers that we need to break down as well.
Yes, and certainly, you mentioned childcare. It's something we're going to return to, just as part of the general structural barriers that exist in so many professions. And Deputy Commissioner McMahon had also referred to it in terms of her own experience. So thank you so much for that. We might ask you, Michelle O'Boyle, if you wouldn't mind, to come in just in terms of pathways into a solicitor's profession, and even more importantly, to work your way up and to become a partner. The statistics coming out of your profession are good, but given, I suppose, that we've had, parity, we'd say, with our graduates, as many females as males graduating, in fact, more over the past 30 years, there is a leak happening somewhere when we don't have that 50% being replicated all the way to partner level. But in terms of pathways of entry, maybe.
Sure. Okay. So, well, just first of all, in terms of, I agree with Minister McEntee, that if you have to see it, to be it, if you like. I certainly agree with that. And in terms of in the Law Society, we introduced last year a sort of a booklet for transition year students, which we make available to schools, and we have one for the schools and one for the students. So therefore, if they're going in to spend their 2 weeks transition year training, that it is actually constructive, that they have a program of work and they prepare before they go in to do their training, and the schools prepare. So therefore, they both, you know, rather than going in to do training for a week or two, which is meaningless, they actually do learn quite properly about what the profession is all about. And that's very, very useful, I have to say. But just in terms of the pathway, you do your law degree and you then apply to the Law Society to do entrance examinations. And if you succeed in those examinations, you're then, and if you manage to secure getting a training contract, which can be difficult, you then are on your way to qualifying as a solicitor. What we have found is that, and this is perfectly understandable, in the modern world, most young people want to work in Dublin. And the difficulty is we don't have people who want to work in the smaller country areas. They want to be in the large city areas. And there can be a difficulty in getting a training contract, you know, in the larger city areas. But we do have a program in place where we're trying to encourage people to apply for training contracts outside of the large cities. Now, when you know you get your training contract, obviously it's important, you know, to realise that you're going to get a broad training initially. That's the way it should be. You're going to be trained in every area of practice, and then you might decide to specialise. And depending where your interest is, I mean, some lawyers will want to be a commercial lawyer in a large law firm. Other lawyers will want to be a probate solicitor, as I say, or can go into industry if you like. But there is different pathways, and the fact is, you're not pigeonholed into practicing in a solicitor's office. I mean, that certainly is the case. But in terms of I suppose, progression in terms of partnerships, you know, as I said, 53% of the profession are female, 35% of those are partners. I also said that I think some of the drop off is a natural attrition. People just naturally decide that they want to, that they give up, if you like, their professional life for family life or for caring for an elderly parent, but also the barriers which you mentioned earlier in terms of childcare, in terms of breaking this glass ceiling, because you know up to 2014. The solicitor's profession was very much was male dominated, and you know, you didn't see females in prominent positions within the solicitor's practice. And now that you do, and the minister has very kindly highlighted the huge range of areas, people, you know, are, you know, probably much more inclined to understand that they do have promotion prospects, and that they can reach the highest level in their profession.
Okay, thank you for that. Can we move on now maybe to Deputy Commissioner McMahon? And Marie, for you, I mean, there were a couple of very specific questions about joining in Garda Síochána, presumably after graduating, but also just generally kind of pathways and maybe challenges. You mentioned some of them earlier around childcare, and we will return to that, but barriers you might have otherwise encountered besides that as a woman, let's say, and in Garda Síochána.
You know, from Garda Síochána's point of view, we really want to be representative of the society we're policing. So diversity, I suppose, for us, it's broader than just women. And you know, we're for our next recruitment campaign, which hopefully will be in September or thereabouts. You know, we hope to do a very extensive piece of work in terms of attracting a broad range of people from not just socioeconomic diverse backgrounds, but also New Irish and a whole range of hard to reach groups. So we'll be putting a lot of work into that. Also in September this year, for the first time ever, we're working with the Access Programme in a number of colleges, and we're hoping to attract and offer a number of paid internships, maybe for 6 or 9 months. And I'm hoping that that'll be very attractive as well, because it'll give people an opportunity to come in without a full commitment or anything like that, and experience what it's like to either serve as a member of a Garda Síochána or in some other specialist function that our Garda staff do along the way. And I suppose another way of dipping your toe in the water, so to speak, without making that full commitment is the Garda Reserve. Now that's unpaid, but the training is provided, and you can do it for, you know, for as long as you wish. But you really get a hands-on first-hand experience of what it's like to be a guard, you know, in almost all divisions in the country, or counties in the country, I should say. So there are, you know, there are lots of opportunities there. And in terms of the recruitment, then, you know, the recruits undergo a 2-year training program. It's a level 7 degree accredited by UL, and that's paid. So, you know, that's paid for as you go. So sometimes people think, you know, that there's a financial impact. And yes, maybe the wages aren't great at the outset, but you know, your degree is paid for, you're fed and found in Templemore, and you do get a training allowance. And these are all really important aspects. And as part of our research in terms of barriers to recruitment, or barriers even to just knowing the basics about the job, that came up as one of them. Because what was said was, and this isn't just confined to An Garda Síochána, it's all so the broader public service, that if you're not in the know, well, then it's difficult to find out, you know. And so we need to work hard at, I suppose, different mediums of getting our message out, and you know, putting the obvious things out, you know, stating the obvious at times, because while it might be obvious to all of us on you know, on the call this evening, it might not be obvious to others. So I think we have a bit of work to do there across the public service in general.
Yes, and you're talking about the trying to attract more diverse, if you like, recruits for An Garda Síochána. That was something that just came up, you know, how to encourage more minorities to join, because as you say, of course, An Garda Síochána should be representative of the society it serves. And just in terms of yourself, would you say you yourself faced particular barriers because of your gender?
I wouldn't, to be honest. In fact, I would probably say I benefited because, you know, as I said in my opening remarks, I probably was that token woman and kind of didn't realize it. I thought I was great getting all these opportunities, but there weren't that many of us at the time. So I always put my hand up, and I was given the opportunities and made the most of it. So I couldn't say it was a disadvantage, to be honest, or that I faced any barriers. In fact, you know, I would say that it gave me opportunities that I mightn't have had otherwise.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, but you were far from the token woman in the room. I mean, evidenced by the fact that you are now Deputy Commissioner, and hopefully someday Commissioner. Our first Commissioner of An Garda Síochána who is a woman would be wonderful. I think it's fantastic that, you know, opportunities began to open up for women, but I imagine you had to work extremely hard for them nonetheless. So Maura, over to you now, and a couple of the very specific questions touch on the financial barriers to become a barrister, and a couple of people in fact asked, did you not consider becoming the safer solicitor instead? And so pathways for you, if you like, why? And Michelle, I'm not saying it's completely safe, I'm sure it's a very challenging profession too, but relatively speaking.
I suppose the way to answer that question is to view it almost as a twofold question, one in respect of me personally, and then in respect of society generally. For me personally, I wanted to be a litigator when I was doing law. I wanted to be arguing. Some would say I like the sound of my own voice, possibly a little too much. But I like the cut and thrust of court. It is hard work. Becoming a barrister, when I was in UCG, NUIG as it is now, they used to tell us if you do the bar, it'll take you 3 years to make it at the bar. When I was at the King's Inns, they used to say it'll take you 5 years to make it at the bar. Then when I came down to the bar, they said, oh, it'll take you 7 years to make it at the bar. And reality, it's probably about 10 years. And by the phrase make it at the bar, what I mean by that is to have the economic capacity after about 10 years that your colleagues that you left school with or left college with had 10 years prior to you. So in other words, you have to be about 10 years at the bar before you could even think of talking to a bank manager about hedging her bets, I say rather than his bets, her bets in giving you a mortgage. All of that. It is a longer path. It is a lonelier path. I'm not saying that the work is more difficult, but I went down on circuit, which means on average, I was doing 25,000 miles a year. That is not an attractive idea to some people. I used to envy Dublin barristers who'd say things like, gosh, I was in the office at 9 a.m. I'd have 2 hours on the road under my belt preparing to show up down in Sligo to start a meeting at 9 o'clock or 9:30, and not back in Dublin till 9:30 that evening, and then doing work, reading the papers for the next day, and maybe traipsing off down to Mullingar or wherever. You're on the road 4 days a week. It's a very tough path, a very lonely path. Every female barrister who's a junior counsel, every single one of them knows how to change a wheel. Every single one of them has a pump to blow up the tires of their car. Every single one of them has the emergency triangle in case they would break down whilst out on circuit in the early morning hours or the late evening hours. It is a tough path, but to a degree, it's a vocation. It's something I really wanted to do. And I think that any students out there or any members of the public who would like to consider it as a pathway, I think they should have the opportunity so to do. And that's why I keep saying education is the great leveler, and we should all have access to the education that allows us to make the decisions in respect of our own career paths. The temptations, I can understand them. People coming out of college, they're 21, maybe 22 years of age. Do they go to the Law Society and become a solicitor and potentially start off in one of the big five, earning 40, 50,000 a year as trainees? Or do they come down here to the Bar of Ireland, have their master, pay their fees for the first year, and live hand to mouth for the decade thereafter? It is a career path one has to approach wide-eyed and be considerate of the risks and the hurdles that you face. But I'd like to think that now, with greater gender equality in the Law Society, where we have now entered into a program of what they call equitable briefing, where we're trying to encourage the 50% of women solicitors to brief the 41% of female juniors and to brief the 18% of female seniors. So if we had equality of briefing, I think there would be greater incomes achieved by younger barristers starting off, but there isn't. And then barriers to career at the bar, they include normal barriers in society, in that when you want to impress at the bar, you're only as good as your last brief. How do you get that brief? Do you get it by going to play a soccer match with the boys who play with the solicitors, who play with the claims agents from the state or from the insurance companies? Do you get it by playing golf with them? They all have those opportunities. I said this before, if I was to approach a claims manager and say, let's go for pints, let's go for drinks, God knows what he might think. And invariably they are he's. There are more females becoming claims managers in the state claims agency, which briefs more men than women. Similarly so in the DPP and respective barristers down the country. The majority of junior counsels being briefed by the state are male, not female. The more equality of briefing that we have, the better opportunities, and therefore the hurdles will be lowered. I'm not saying they will be eradicated, but the hurdles will be lowered. But do I believe that we do need an independent bar, that we need the split that we have that has worked and that does work to the advantage of all citizenry? I think so, yes. The advantage of having an independent referral bar is that, Ursula, you can be in Galway and you can brief Maura McNally in Dublin. You could be living in Buncrana and brief Maura McNally. You can be living in Cork, but you have access to those barristers. Whereas with solicitors, you either go for that particular firm, and Michelle will know what I mean about when I talk about the big five, or as they are now becoming the big 6, 7 or 8 in Dublin. It's almost like a machine that's going around soaking up practitioners, junior solicitors, and taking them on board. And then you have, to a degree, not quite forum shopping, but barrister shopping, where there are certain institutions that have the money that will brief the leading specialists in a particular area, so that if they're being sued, they can say, oh, that person can't act. Sure, I briefed him or her. That's a conflict. So the more you have of independence, the greater the opportunity you have of ensuring that individuals have the right of effective representation. But to go back to the original part of the question, the hurdles are definitely there. As I mentioned earlier, we do have the Denham Fellowship, which is of assistance to people. We now have a new offer coming in from Ms. Justice Heenahan, that's nearly finalised, where she's assisting junior members under 5 years at the bar in their first 3 years. She's retired, Ms. Justice Heenahan, she's assisting them in their first 3 years, and she's choosing candidates for that. But it is the first few years of your career where it is very, very difficult. And you look around at the person you have school with or college with, and they're all earning. And you're in the evenings working, trying to work as a barista or pull pints or whatever to just try and feed yourself. There are hurdles.
I mean, just to give you some feedback for all of you, we're getting some very positive comments in, and they're saying it's such a fantastic talk. I could listen all night, but I'm conscious that we can't, unfortunately, hang on to you all night. But just very briefly, would you be in favour of quotas at any of the levels? So say for senior counsel in particular, where you'd imagine there might be some barriers, or for judicial appointments?
I am hugely in favours of quotas. They are positive discrimination. But when you are trying to drag our society into recognition of equality and drag our society into recognising the worth and value of the female opinion, then I believe it is a positive step.
Mm-hmm.
And when we look at gender balance, we all talk about committees where, for example, the Bar of Ireland, the Bar Council has 24 members, 12 are men, 12 are female, and people say that's brilliant. But then I think of Ruth Bader Ginsburg when she was asked how many women should be on the Supreme Court, when would she be happy? She said, when they're all female.
Yes.
If you say that, you're considered a radical. And yet when it was all men, nobody batted an eyelid.
No, I think it's okay for us to be radical, to be perfectly honest. I think we've been
I think we have to be
for long enough. Yeah.
our goals.
So now the other broad theme, we have so little time, in fact, but the other broad theme that emerged was around these other barriers, which are structural, and largely what came up a lot was around leave, maternity leave, because, as we said, Minister McAtee has brought that to the fore as an issue. I mean, not that you have brought it to the fore, it has been an issue largely ignored, well, completely ignored practically for many years. And it's an unusual situation. It's not just unusual in Ireland. We've seen in the UK the emergency legislation to permit the Attorney General there to go on leave. I think for a lot of the students listening, they're probably appalled that this is even an issue. So just in terms of those kind of structural barriers, childcare is an enormous one, but there are others simply in how the work is done, which could be reformed to make it more attractive to everybody, but in particular we will say women. So I wonder if you could comment a little bit on that. Are you equally appalled that in fact we haven't really moved along in terms of making affordable childcare affordable or available, that we're in a position in politics that in fact for a sitting minister there's no recognition of the need of it at all, which is quite shocking? And Anne-Marie, you've also mentioned challenges in that in your own profession. So given we only have, you know, the guts of 5, even though I might hang on to you for one final question after that, minutes left, I might just invite whoever feels they want to make a comment on this to comment. Will we do it by, like I do in classes, show of hands? Somebody who might want to jump in to say something on that. So also in class, if nobody does a show of hands.
I don't mind jumping
Oh.
from a self-employed perspective, which is what each barrister is. I know that the greatest issue for what used to be our Resilience and Performance Committee, of which I was chair for 2 years, was this whole subject of childcare. And what I noted from the complaints or requests for assistance, they were all from women, even though almost 60% of the practicing barristers are men. The requests for assistance, and that wasn't assistance in having childcare, because we just don't have childcare here at the bar because everybody is self-employed. But but it was where could they find childcare? Was there a childcare facility near a court, X, Y, and Z? But it was always the female raising the issue, not the men, not the 59% of men at the bar. But until it's right, it's no more than woman's worth within the home. That whole idea, when it comes to a Michelle who specializes in family law, will be able to expand upon this more than I, because I don't do family law. But the idea that because you work at home, worth is less than that of the man who goes out and works 9 to 5, no recognition of the value of that work, or not sufficient recognition. And similarly, so I believe there has to be recognition of that childcare and the need for it. But it is a societal issue and one that has to be addressed.
Absolutely. And yes, and that's what makes it almost all the more shocking. It's not just women that have children, society as a whole, families have children. So I see Anne-Marie and Helen, you've both unmuted yourselves. So I'll invite maybe Anne-Marie say a brief word on that.
Yeah, I suppose the thing about childcare is the value we place on it. And I suppose, you know, I'm particularly probably thinking about wages in childcare vis-a-vis the cost of childcare. And, you know, the reality is, certainly speaking from my own experience, unless I had a really good childminder, you know, I would not have been able to do the things I did, to have that reliability, you know, an evening that I was late or I got caught with an investigation, or, you know, something came up that I just couldn't be there. You know, and to have that flexibility is just so important, and to know that your child is safe. So, and I suppose it's hard to explain it really, the importance of it, because it just peace of mind that it gives you when you have that and you know it works. You know, that's really important. From British Economist perspective, we obviously have our, you know, paid maternity leave, and you know the flexible working and all of that applies as it does across the public sector. It's probably a little bit more difficult in regards because you know you put shift work into the equation, and you put having to go to court, and there's lots of things that you just can't park and you know and leave for a few days, because you have to be available to go to court if you have a court case. You know, so there are challenges there that you know that aren't obvious at the outset, but when you actually start thinking it through, you know, they can be a barrier to people. And the other thing is, I suppose, it's the whole idea of career progression then, and people, women in particular, not wanting to avail of family-friendly policies or term time or whatever else, because it just might in some way lessen their chances, or at least a perceived, or indeed maybe in some cases a reality, that it lessens their chances of getting that lateral movement or promotion or whatever the case may be. You know, so and of course our job is, like many jobs, is very much about being present. You know, because we can't do our job remotely really for the most part. It's a bit like nurses or you know lots of other professions. You just have to be physically present. So there are things there that you know when you actually start thinking it through are quite or can be a barrier. But in general, we try to make it work. But it's not always easy, and I suppose getting childcare when it requires around the clock, it's a very big issue.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the importance is, as we say, to make it a societal issue as opposed to entirely a woman's issue. I think you've raised some very interesting points about perceived bias against people who would take periods of leave, making it all the more important that this becomes normalised, a non-gender issue. The research would bear out exactly as what you're saying, that it would in fact disadvantage those who have gone on leave. So Minister McAtee, we might let you in here, and it would be remiss of us not to also offer our congratulations. The first pregnancy is extremely exciting. It comes with this other attached issue, of course, and we'll let you address that now.
I mean, look, I suppose I'm not the first female politician to have a baby, but I'm the first female cabinet minister, and it has raised a number of questions, and I don't know whether it's because maybe I'm in the position that I'm in, but there never seems to be, or there hasn't been a situation where colleagues of mine or women who have had babies in the last number of years, where when they've had children, they, change has happened following on from that. So for me, I really feel this is an opportunity and an absolute need that, we use this time, or if I could put it that way, to actually bring about change, because for whatever reason, it hasn't happened in the past. I'm not the first woman in politics, but nothing has ever changed. So I think it's so important that we use this time and this space to make sure that it brings about change, whether it's for ministers, whether it's TDs, whether it's senators, whether it's our councillors, but also that sets an example as well for so many different professions. I mean, I think we have lost, if I could say lost, but we've lost so many, wonderful, strong, intelligent women in so many different careers, because they haven't had the support, because they haven't had the childcare, because they maybe felt that they couldn't stay and progress in their career. They haven't had that flexibility. And we have women who haven't gone into professions, be it politics or others, because of that perception. So I think it's so important now, and there is thankfully more of a focus now on how we can provide better childcare, how we can create a flexible working environment, acknowledging that, lives aren't 9 to 5, that we do need that bit of flexibility. So whether it's in the Gardaí, whether it's in politics, whether it's in working in the legal profession, the focus now, I think, is on how can we make it flexible, acknowledging that men have families as well, and that it can work for everybody in that regard. But unfortunately, I think because we haven't had that to date, we have lost a lot of really wonderful women in many professions, or we've prevented people from going into professions and following those career paths. But I think it can change, and hopefully it will change in the very near future.
Yes, well, hear to that, and thank you for that too. And I think certainly within politics, people would often point to some of the other things, how the Dáil works, how politics works late in the evening and so on, which isn't conducive to anybody's working life, even if you didn't have a family, to be perfectly frank. But thanks for those observations. And Michelle, I see that you're...
Well, no, I'll just maybe just add in, I suppose, Minister McEntee is, bringing into sharp focus the issues around maternity leave. And I suppose it's now creating a long overdue conversation about it. And the whole issue of where employers need to be looking at even flexible working hours. That's something which I think, it is not really, employers, I don't think, really have explored that option, even not around just maternity leave, but in the generality, people, who do have young children. We're losing so many young women because they don't have that flexibility of work that needs to be addressed. But as I say, Mr. McEntee is, bringing that all into sharp focus, which is, it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And we could stay here all night discussing that one issue, in fact, but as I said earlier, unfortunately, we can't. So there was one question that the students were keen that I would ask you. So we, in your own interests, a brief response would be super, of course, and it is this. So is there anything you wish you had known when you were a student or starting out that you could share with the student body tonight? So will we start actually, Michelle, I can see you on my screen. So.
Okay, well, I suppose academic results don't necessarily determine your destiny, because the reality is you start out with one career path, and as I say, it can lead to many other career paths. And people, I find sometimes, and even now when I look at the Leaving Cert students and the difficulties of having around COVID, they're so focused on results, and really and truly you can't just be too focused on results. You can still, I think, develop very successful careers by going through different pathways.
Yeah, wonderful piece of advice, actually, even though I would encourage you all to work extremely hard when you're in college. But the rounded individual is extremely important too, and to keep that in mind. It's not all about the mark on the piece of paper at the end of the year. So it is very sound advice. And Marie, you're next on my screen, so we'll take it in that order maybe.
Yeah, I suppose there is something about, and it touches on what Michelle has just referenced. It's about the will and the skill, and the huge importance of the will. You can learn a lot of skills along the way, but the will and the determination and the work ethic really is just so important. And what I would say you know, as I reflect back. So, you know, there's a kind of a triangle. So yes, the skill and the, you know, the ability is really important. And there's the will. And then there's that sense of integrity and self-worth and, you know, and in my case, you know, public sector values. So they would be my triangle of things. But you could actually apply those to almost anything. And, you know, anyone on their own, you know, will be, you know, you won't get as far as you possibly could. But if you can triangulate those, really, the sky's the limit.
Super, Anne-Marie, thank you. And Helen, you're next on my screen. So, Minister.
I think if I could say one thing, if I think about life now and go back and to my young self in college, the one thing I would say is that life is unpredictable, and it's important, yes, to have a plan and to try and to set yourself goals, but at the same time, if things don't go to plan, if things change, you know, it's okay too. And I think you need to seize opportunities when they come, even if it's not what's in your plan, and even if it's not what's expected. So I would just say, you know, life is unpredictable. Yes, plan, and it's good to set yourself goals. If things don't work out that way, or if your path changes, that's okay too. And it's really important to embrace that as well.
Thank you. And Maura.
Sorry, I was just unmuting. I would say two things, and I would take on board what the Minister had just said, which is that we need to be able to, as they say, hug and roll. So no matter what life throws at you, grab it and roll with it. And then from a student perspective, if one were interested in doing the bar and becoming a litigator, partake in your Law Society debates, your Lit and Deb debating. Take the opportunity to stand up on your hind legs. Take the opportunity to learn to express yourself, because even if you don't become a litigator, if you get the experience of standing up in front of people, and I have to admit, when I stand up now, people are behind me looking at me. So that's okay. I don't know they're there. And then I hate it when I stand up and I actually see people. It's like, oh my God, they're all looking at me. But it's a great skill in life, whether you're going to be a litigator or just generally. It gives you an opportunity to know how to express yourself in the future. So partake in these opportunities that are afforded to you in college, the debating societies. It also allows you to express yourself, become involved in issues, and you're able to get your point across. And you cannot put a value on that, the capacity to get your point of view across.
Wonderful. I think that is solid advice from the four of you. I really don't want to bring proceedings to a close, but unfortunately the time is against us, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. All that remains for me now is to thank all of you who attended and sent in your wonderful questions and contributions, to congratulate the Law Society again on their centenary celebrations, and to thank them for organising this wonderful event. So thank you to the committee for that. But of course, our sincerest thanks and gratitude go to the panel. You have been so generous and giving of your time. You have given us very valuable insights into your respective professions. You've given us massive cause for optimism. But most importantly, you have given us something to aspire to, and for the students who are here tonight also to aspire to. So much remains to be done, the old adage, but you certainly, the four of you, you are a powerful representation on how far we have come in the professions that you represent. So Guru Mahigav, and thank you for that. So finally then, happy International Women's Day to all. Banach di féile idirnáisiúnta na man, Guru Míle Mahigav ar fad a sachta bhelin. Thank you all very much for attending, and good evening.